The alarms tore through the ship before I even reached the bridge, and my first thought was that we were already dead. I am Vex Orin, sub-commander of the Alliance vessel Halcyon Vow, and in that moment every screen around me was bleeding red. 3 hostile ships had dropped out of hidden space directly on top of us, and our shields were already failing. My crew froze. I froze. 12 years of training and none of it prepared me for a trap this clean. "Pilot Calder, get us moving," I shouted, more out of habit than hope. He was just the shuttle pilot, a quiet human named Owen Calder who had barely spoken 20 words to me in 3 months of service. I did not expect a miracle from a man who ate alone and answered questions with single nods. What happened next changed everything I believed about his kind. Owen did not answer me. He simply moved. His hands found the control console like they had been waiting years for this exact moment, and the Halcyon Vow rolled hard to starboard before I even finished my sentence. The first enemy volley passed through the space we had just vacated. My body slammed against the railing, and for a second I thought he had made a mistake. He had not made a mistake. He had read the attack pattern before it fully formed. "Belt in," he said, and his voice was flat, almost bored, like a man commenting on the weather. Then he did something no simulation had ever taught me. He cut the main engines for exactly 2 seconds, letting our ship drift silently, invisible to their targeting arrays for just long enough, before slamming the throttle forward and threading us between 2 enemy hulls with a gap so narrow I could see the rivets on their armor plating. My crew stared at him. I stared at him. Nobody breathed. The lead enemy ship tried to correct, tried to bring its weapons around, but Owen was already gone, already 3 moves ahead, guiding us into the debris field from a destroyed satellite station that only he seemed to have noticed on the scanners. He used the wreckage as cover, weaving through broken metal at a speed that should have torn our hull apart, and somehow it did not. "Configuration Delta," he muttered to himself, more than to us. Their captain trained under the old doctrine. Predictable. I had no idea what Configuration Delta meant, but the way he said it chilled me. This was not the voice of a shuttle pilot. This was the voice of someone who had seen this exact tactic 100 times before, in a place far worse than this. Within 4 minutes, 1 enemy ship was disabled, drifting with dead engines. The second retreated, damaged and confused. The third simply stopped firing altogether, as if its crew had suddenly remembered something important, something about the ship they were facing. The bridge went silent except for the hum of recovering systems. Owen leaned back in his seat, exhaled once, and said nothing else. He did not celebrate. He did not look proud. He looked tired, like a man who had just done something he wished he never had to do again. I could not let it go, not this time. "Who are you?" I asked him directly, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. He looked at me, and for the first time, I saw something behind his eyes. Not arrogance, not secrecy for the sake of it, something closer to grief. "Just a pilot," he said, and turned back to his controls. I did not believe him, and 3 hours later, my disbelief was proven right. The enemy ship we disabled sent a coded transmission before its crew was captured, and our intelligence officer, a sharp young woman named Talia Brenner, intercepted it. She came to my quarters pale and shaking, holding a data slate like it might explode. "You need to see this," she said. "It is about Calder." The transmission was not addressed to us. It was addressed to their command, warning them to abort the mission the moment they identified our pilot. The message used a name I did not recognize as Owen's, but the description matched him exactly. They called him the Ghost of Meridian Ridge. I had heard that name before, whispered in old briefings about a conflict humanity fought decades ago, a war fought entirely among their own colonies before they ever joined the wider alliance. It was a war so costly that most alien historians refused to study it directly, calling it a cautionary tale about what happens when an entire species turns its full strength inward. Talia pulled up his sealed record, the one that required 3 separate authorization codes to access, codes that had just been triggered automatically by the transmission itself. What we found stripped away everything I thought I understood about the man sitting quietly in our pilot seat. Owen Calder was not a shuttle pilot who had never seen real conflict. He was one of only 4 survivors of a defense action that historians simply called the Ridge, a desperate stand where a small human outpost held off an overwhelming force for 11 days, with dwindling supplies and no chance of reinforcement. He had been 19 years old. He had flown 17 missions in that stretch, each one considered a near-certain loss before it began, and each one he returned from, though rarely with an intact ship. The record noted that after the 11th day, when reinforcements finally arrived, Owen was the one who guided the surviving evacuation ships through a minefield using nothing but memory and instinct, because the outpost's navigation systems had already failed. 312 people lived because of that flight. The record listed his official commendations, then noted, in a colder tone, that he had requested no further combat assignments after the war ended, and had asked specifically to be reassigned to civilian transport duty under a lower-profile role. He had asked to become invisible. I sat with that knowledge for a long time before I found the courage to speak with him again. When I did, I chose the observation deck, late at night, where the artificial gravity hummed low, and the stars outside felt endless and indifferent. He was already there, sitting alone, the way he always was. "I read your file," I said, no longer able to pretend otherwise. He did not turn around right away. When he finally did, there was no anger in his face, only a tired kind of acceptance, like a man who always knew this day would come. "I figured someone would eventually," he said. "The transmission gave it away." "Why did you never tell anyone?" I asked. "You could have used that reputation. You could have commanded ships instead of flying them for people who barely acknowledged you existed." He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the stars like they held an answer he had been searching for his whole life. "Because reputation is what gets people killed," he said. "The moment they know what I did, they expect me to do it again. They stop seeing a person and start seeing a weapon. I did not survive that war to spend the rest of my life being one. I did not have a response ready for that. My people are taught from childhood that glory earned in battle should be worn proudly, displayed, remembered forever in songs and monuments. Owen's people, or at least this one, had learned something different. They had learned that some victories cost too much to celebrate. "The people on that outpost," I said carefully. "The ones you saved, do you ever think about them?" "Every day," he said simply. "That is exactly why I do not talk about it. Talking about it turns it into a story. It was not a story. It was people I could not save, and people I barely managed to. I do not need applause for that. I need it to have mattered, quietly, and then I need to move forward." I thought about my own species then, our long unbroken tradition of proud declarations after every conflict, our monuments listing casualties like trophies. I wondered, for the first time, if we had ever actually understood what those numbers meant, or if we had simply learned to admire the shape of sacrifice, without feeling its true weight. "You handled today's attack like it was nothing," I said, "like you had already lived through worse." "I had," he said, and something almost like a small, sad smile crossed his face. "Today was easy. Nobody I love was on this ship. Nobody I could not afford to lose." That single sentence told me more about him than his entire service record had. Over the following weeks, something between us changed, quietly, the way most real changes happen. Owen still spoke rarely, still ate alone most nights, but occasionally he would sit near the rest of the crew, and occasionally he would answer a question with more than one word. The crew, having learned who he truly was, no longer mocked his silence. They understood now that his silence was not emptiness. It was the sound of a man carrying something enormous, carefully, so it would not spill onto anyone else. I began to notice details I had missed before. The way his eyes tracked exits in every room he entered, not out of paranoia, but out of habit, built from necessity. The way he always knew the fastest route to the medical bay, without ever asking. The way he flinched, almost invisibly, at sudden loud alarms, then steadied himself within a single breath, faster than anyone else on the ship could manage. He was not haunted in the way stories usually describe haunting, loud and dramatic. He was haunted quietly, efficiently, the way a person learns to carry a great weight so it never shows on the outside. Months later, during a formal review of the incident, my superiors asked me to summarize what allowed the Halcyon Vow to survive an ambush that should have destroyed us. I could have written pages about Owen's tactical brilliance, his impossible flying, his record from the ridge. Instead, I wrote something simpler, something I believed mattered more. I wrote that our survival came from a pilot who never wanted recognition, who never wanted to be seen as extraordinary, and who did what needed to be done anyway, without asking anyone to understand the cost. Owen never read that report, and he never asked to. He returned to flying transport routes, quiet as always, occasionally answering a question with more than one word, occasionally sitting closer to the rest of us than before. I no longer thought of him as just a silent pilot. I understood now that his silence had never been emptiness. It had been the sound of a man who had already given everything he had, once, and had chosen peace instead of glory ever since. And somewhere out among the stars, I suspected there were more like him, quiet people from a young species that the galaxy had underestimated, carrying wars nobody else had witnessed, choosing every single day not to become the weapon their history could have made them. That, I realized, was the most dangerous kind of strength there was.